Today I'm going to show you some fun, easy ideas that you're actually going to want to try with Sharpie Creative Markers. Welcome back. I'm Christine. This is Mike. The biggest complaint about Sharpie Creative Markers is that there aren't a lot of colors, but they actually took care of it with their new earth tone set. So I don't want to hear in the comments, yeah, they're great, but there aren't enough colors. They covered that. For those of you who don't know, Sharpie originally came out with a set of 12 markers in bullet tip and brush tip. The new set that they just came out with is called the Earth Tones, but they only come in the bullet set for now. My only complaint about the new markers is that none of them are labeled. You can see here that there isn't any indication of a name or a code explaining what color this is. If you go out and buy both of these sets like I did, I highly recommend coming up with a way to label them. That way you can color swatch them, and while you're working through these sketchbook ideas, you'll know exactly what to expect from each color. Color swatching these markers is completely optional, so if you're ready, grab your sketchbook and let's get started on the first idea. I'm using this tiny watercolor sketchbook because I love creating smaller illustrations and artwork with acrylic paint markers. The first idea is based off of a tutorial I found on Instagram from Chaos Life LBC. This creator makes all kinds of paint marker tutorials that you can use with your Sharpie Creative Markers. I found it a little difficult to hold all of the markers in my hand at once, so I started to layer each color individually. I did this by scribbling each color on top of the one below it. I love this little watercolor sketchbook, but if you overwork the paper like I am, the fibers start lifting underneath the paint markers and form clumps. To avoid this, I recommend letting each layer dry before adding more. Or you can be just like me and use your finger to blend the colors together while brushing away the excess paper fibers at the same time. Just like the tutorial, it's time to add a grassy background. I'm using my brush tip markers to add some quick strokes to create some grass. I can always come back and add more grass later if I like, but right now I'm going to use my mint green marker to add some flowers that are similar to what I saw in the tutorial. This is where you can have whatever creative freedom you like. You don't have to use the same colors as me. I'm just trying to keep it as close to the tutorial as possible because for the next idea, I'm going to show you how I'm building off of the tutorial to make something completely unique and original for me. I love how this yellow looks in the center of the flowers, so I decided to add some additional grass around the flowers using the same color. Finally, I'm adding some color swatches off to the side because I think it looks really cool. It also makes the page look complete. Now that we're warmed up, this is where the fun really begins. I'm starting the next page the same way by drawing a box and filling it in with light blue scribbles. Then I layer in a darker blue, switch back to my light blue, and blend the two together using that same rubbing technique I did earlier with my finger. This is to remove any of those annoying loose paper fibers. This time, instead of adding grass, I'm using my bullet tip marker to make a crisscross pattern that gives the illusion of leaves. At least I think it looks like leaves. After the first layer, I bring in a lighter blue to blend everything into the background, and then I smudge it with my finger again. I'll continue to repeat this process using the light blue until I'm happy with what I have. A lot of my friends love mushrooms, and I do too. They're so easy to draw from memory, and that bright red really pops against the blue background. To add more excitement, I'm surrounding them with light green leaves using a bullet tip. Then I'm layering in some of that wispy grass that we created earlier with my dark blue brush tip. It's almost impossible to make this look bad, so feel free to add as much grass as you'd like. Normally, this is where I'd want to bring in some colored pencils and ballpoint pens, but for this video, I promised myself that I would stick to just the Sharpie Creative Markers. With the addition of the new earth tone set, I feel like this should be all that I need. But don't let me stop you from having fun. If you want to grab some of your other art supplies, go ahead and do that now and go crazy. And there you have it, an original idea inspired by a fun tutorial. But I'm not stopping there. I want to fill an entire spread using the same technique, only this time, instead of scribbles, I'm filling my background with long vertical lines. They don't have to be perfect, they just have to fill the entire background and go the same way. To create depth, I'm making sure that the edges are darker than the center. Objects that are closer to you always appear darker in color, and objects further away will be lighter. I'm going back over the background with my lighter blue to fill in all of the gaps. To blend everything together, I'm using a few light purple strokes across the entire background before I start to add thick, darker strokes on top of that. Now that I'm adding branches with my brush tips, you've probably guessed that I'm creating a forest. Forests are another fun thing that you can draw, and they're extremely easy to create from memory. I'm adding some leaves with a light purple and pink using my bullet tips and a dotting motion. This isn't just any forest, it's a mushroom forest. So I'm placing some bright red mushrooms that live here towards the bottom of the spread. Just like before, the bright red is going to look amazing against the blue background. Let's add some green leaves and pieces of grass around the mushrooms to ground them on the forest floor. I want to tie everything together, so I'm scribbling some dark green on top of my spread to create a canopy of leaves. This is a great way to experiment using midtones to bring some of the background colors into the foreground and create a colorful and interesting scene. The only thing you don't want to do is use the same red as the mushrooms anywhere else. You want that shade of red where it is to draw your eye down and make them the focus of the piece. And there you have it, a mushroom forest created entirely with Sharpie creative markers. I love how this one turned out and how it's so sketchy, but yet it's obvious that it's a mushroom forest. Moving right along, the next idea starts with a circle. I don't know how to draw a perfect circle, so don't mind me as I struggle through this part. Yeah. Here you can see that the Sharpie creative markers are a little bit streaky if you're using them quickly. In this case, it doesn't matter because I'm going to use the lighter and the darker shades of purple from both of these sets to create puffy clouds on top. As I fill in the clouds, I'm leaving a small area in between for the background to peek through. Between the original set of 12 markers and the earth tone set, there's a beautiful variety of purples and pinks to use. I'm layering each of these colors in this idea to create some whimsical puffy clouds that are aesthetically pleasing to look at. Of course, then I've ruined the aesthetic by drawing these weird stars, so if you're following along, don't do that. If purple, whimsical, and puffy aren't your thing, I'm using green and blue in the next idea. As I layer the clouds, I'm leaving a little bit of white in between each color. I'm making the clouds more bumpy, and I think this makes them look more realistic and dreamy. Make sure you take your time with this part because there's nothing worse than accidentally coloring in the part that you were supposed to leave white. If you're not comfortable going directly in with the Sharpie creative markers, I would recommend taking a pencil and sketching this out first. But if you do accidentally color in the wrong part, that's okay too. This is just for fun. You can always do it again on another page, so don't worry. It looks flat right now, but once I add some chunky white highlights with my bullet tip, the dreamy aesthetic of this doodle comes to life. These are two fun styles that are simple and easy to recreate, and they can be a little bit addictive once you get the hang of them. The next idea comes from some old galaxy paintings I made back in 2020. At the time, I was obsessed with creating galaxy art, but I never shared these pieces with anyone because I wasn't happy with how I blended the colors. While working through these ideas, I kept thinking about this style and how it might be perfect for the Sharpie creative markers. So I decided to recreate this very special galaxy using the techniques I've been experimenting with today as a way to celebrate artwork I once thought wasn't good enough to share. I started this piece with a simple rectangle and began filling it in using organic wave-like shapes. The goal was for them to resemble nebulas in a galaxy. I worked with 3 shades of blue, a light blue, a mid-tone, and a darker, more saturated blue. Just like the mushroom forest I created earlier, I wanted the center of the galaxy to feel the furthest away, so I kept my deepest shades of purple, blue, and black along the outer edges while letting the lighter colors shine through the middle. For all of the details, I played with a line weight. The thicker parts of each shape sit towards the edges while the thinner strokes taper in the middle. This mirrors the same effect that I use with color. Thicker lines feel closer and thinner lines feel further away. One thing that I've noticed about Sharpie Creative markers is that they're not completely opaque, which can feel a lot like a flaw, but in this case it worked in my favor. With all of the layering that I'm doing in this piece, the colors blend beautifully into each other, except in the areas where I want more contrast. In those spots, I kept the colors sharper and more defined so they would stand out and draw the eye in. Make sure not to put your darkest color in until the very end. This way you can gradually build up your colors and control how much depth you have in your piece. This is why I'm adding the black in now instead of adding it at the beginning. I wanted to match the original inspiration for this as close as possible, so I added 3 circles for planets along the edges. After adding the planets, I thought I was done. I started to add my color swatches off to the side, but then I decided that I wanted to keep going and add more detail. If you're doing this on your own, it might take you a couple of tries to get your galaxy to look just the way you like. But this is something that you can do over and over again with any type of color combination, as long as you follow some of the rules that we just went over. To make the planets stand out more, I outlined them and added a layer of black. This time, I used my brush tip black instead of the bullet tip. The brush tips seem to be much juicier and more saturated, and the black came out so much darker, which you can see here. This extra depth is exactly what this piece needed. Now the planets stand out and the eye is naturally drawn inward in the center of the galaxy. I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. I think it's kind of cute. What do you think? I love how all of the layers and details in this piece come together and to look like a galaxy when you're viewing it from far away. I couldn't help myself. I sketched out the next idea using my Kohl Erase Prismacolor pencils. They come with this beautiful purple pencil, and I swear I'm never going to sketch with any color ever again. And this is all I need. Thank you very much. Look at how good my sketch looks in purple. The next idea is to create a monster. So I've been working on misfit monsters that don't exactly fit into my monster universe, but I still want them to play an important role in their own way. I struggled with this sketchbook idea the most because normally I build my monsters with a base layer of acrylic paint pens or paint, and then I add details with colored pencils and gel pens. This time, I wanted to see what I could create using only Sharpie Creative markers, and it didn't go so well. The body colors are too similar, so the monster looks pretty flat. I couldn't quite get the highlights and the shadows to work the way I wanted, and in the process, I overworked the paper, leaving behind little bits of paper fibers. I think the ideas that I tried earlier are a little bit more forgiving. Even though I carefully planned out my color placement, creating a full monster feels a lot harder than building simple concepts. But I love making monsters, so it's hard not to include one as part of this video. Even the ugliest monsters can make you smile and give you an excuse to be a little silly. For this one, I decided to name her Greta. And Greta's special power is that she can charm plants. With a flick of her wrist and a sprinkle of bamboozle dust, which is the magic dust in the monster universe, she can bring any plant to life, making them smile and sing. One evening though, while wandering through the edge of Sweet Candy Kingdom, Greta found a patch of drooping sunflowers. She sprinkled a pinch of her dust into the air and twirled her wrist in a little circle. With a soft hum, the flowers perked up, their petals glowing faintly in the twilight. Then, to Greta's delight, they began to sing sweet wobbly notes that carried through the forest like the sound of wind chimes. Because wind chimes sound nice. Soon the other monsters came running, curious about the strange music. They stopped and stared at Greta as the flowers swayed and sang in harmony around her. For the first time, Greta didn't feel like a misfit. She felt magical. Even though Greta didn't turn out exactly the way I wanted, I love that Sharpie Creative markers let me experiment with characters and stories that live in my sketchbook. That's what makes them fun. They're not just for creating artwork, but you can use them to create your own worlds too. Thank you for spending time with me during all of these sketchbook ideas today. Let me know in the comments which one was your favorite and which one you might actually try. For more fun Sharpie creative marker ideas, check out this video where I combine them with mixed media, and we'll see you there.